Welcome back. Now, if you're joining us today, you already know that bridging ancient contemplative practice with modern cognitive science is, well, it's a massive undertaking. Today, we've got a truly fascinating explainer lined up for you. We are taking a deep dive into the rigorous neurophenomenological approach of Chogyam Trungpa. We're going to deconstruct the mechanics of the ego, not as a thing, but as a dynamic cognitive process, and explore the radical awakening of somatic cognition. Okay, let's jump right in.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be moving through 6 stages, starting with the trap of spiritual materialism, mapping out the 3-yana journey, diving into the mechanics of shamatha vipassana, exploring Maitri and mudra space awareness, and finally landing on the logic of crazy wisdom. So we have to start with Trungpa's radical redefinition of the self. The ego is a brilliant work of art. Think about that for a second. In this framework, the ego isn't some ontological substance. It's literally not a localized physical structure hiding somewhere in your brain. Actually, it's an elegant, highly dynamic defensive mechanism. It actively co-opts the transient components of our phenomenal experience, what Buddhist epistemology calls the skandhas, just to maintain this grand illusion of a continuous, cohesive self. It's a relentless, active process of grasping, basically an attempt to solidify open, unconditioned space into a static, manageable identity. That brings us to Section 1, diagnosing the ego's co-opting of spirituality, or what we call the trap of spiritual materialism. You see, the primary obstacle in modern contemplative practice is exactly this, spiritual materialism. The crucial takeaway here is that the ego, completely driven by its self-preservation instinct, will actively try to hijack the very tools meant to dismantle it. To really understand spiritual materialism, you have to recognize the incredibly wily cognitive strategies of what Trungpa called the 3 lords of materialism: form, speech, and most dangerously, mind. The Lord of Mind uses spiritual disciplines and complex analytical philosophies just to maintain a hypervigilant self-consciousness. So instead of yielding to absolute space, the ego just puts on a spiritual costume. It turns enlightenment into just another shiny acquisition to guarantee its own survival.
Moving to Section 2, the 3-yana journey. This is our progressive neurophenomenological map.
To counter all that materialism, Trungpa utilized the traditional Tibetan 3-yana system as an incredibly precise sequential map. It's essentially a chronological cognitive journey. You start at the foundational level with the Hinayana, using the strict discipline of shamatha vipassana to literally tame the mind's endless discursive loops. Then you open things up in the Mahayana. Here, practices like Tonglen cultivate bodhicitta and help you realize shunyata, or absolute emptiness. And finally, you reach the Vajrayana, where you're employing direct energetic engagement through formless practices and advanced somatic disciplines. So the progression systematically builds, from microscopic attentional precision out to panoramic emptiness and finally arriving at indestructible wakefulness.
Section 3, the mechanics of shamatha vipassana, the foundational technologies of mind training. Let's look at shamatha, or peaceful abiding. Now, this is absolutely not some dissociative trance. It is intense, focal precision applied to the natural, unmanipulated breath. It's a somatic discipline of touch and go. Trungpa actually likened it to carrying a fragile egg on a spoon. It takes immense, continuous cognitive precision. Now, contrast that sharp focal point with vipassana, or higher awareness. Vipassana is panoramic, spatial insight. It's the peripheral awareness that prevents you from bumping into the furniture while you're focused on carrying that egg. The sheer brilliance of this system is that they function simultaneously. Together, they act as a unified psychological intervention, systematically breaking down that artificially constructed boundary between an observing self and the surrounding space.
And what happens when you actually apply this technology? Do you get a blissful spiritual high? No way. You get cool boredom. Trungpa identified cool boredom as the true barometer of meditative accomplishment. This is a massive departure from the neurotic, dopamine-driven pursuit of altered states we see so often today. By sitting efficiently and simply observing the raw, unadorned rhythm of your breath, you are literally starving the ego's habitual struggle, what he diagnosed as the ape instinct. Stripped of its constant entertainment, the mind just settles. It drops into a highly refreshing, genuine expression of foundational well-being.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, Maitri space awareness and bridging those somatosensory feedback loops.
To take this off the meditation cushion and into daily life, Trungpa brought in the Vajrayana mandala of the 5 Buddha families: Vajra, Ratna, Padma, Karma, and Buddha. In this incredibly elegant framework, the absolute entirety of human personality and neurosis is mapped into these 5 energetic styles. But here's the twist. Each family possesses a confused neurotic dimension, things like anger, pride, or grasping, and a co-emergent awakened wisdom dimension, like pure clarity, equanimity, or discriminating awareness. It brilliantly exposes the dual nature of our psychological makeup. It shows us that neurosis itself actually contains the exact seed of our inherent wisdom. They're 2 sides of the same coin. So how do we actually work with these energies at a neurological level? Well, he developed Maitri space awareness. Translating to loving kindness, this operates as literal space therapy. Practitioners are placed into highly constrained physical postures within specific, intensely colored environments. The whole point is to intentionally evoke and then tolerate massive emotional storms. The objective is absolutely not clinical curation or trying to cure a symptom. The goal is forcing the practitioner to unconditionally accept the raw somatic sensation of their own neurosis without any conceptual self-aggression. You basically train to become an impartial meteorologist of your own internal weather systems. Okay, Section 5, Mudras and Somatic Cognition. This is about pushing tension to its absolute limit. While Maitri evokes those emotional archetypes using color and posture, Mudra space awareness, which is actually adapted from traditional Tibetan monastic dance, pushes physical tension right to the brink. The classic protocol, known as the lizard, involves 3 very explicit steps. First, spatial awareness. You extend your mind into the infinite space both inside and completely surrounding your physical body. Second, extreme intensification. You deliberately build maximum physical and mental compression, pushing your muscular tension and sense of claustrophobia to their absolute limits. And finally, the third step, sudden release, an instantaneous, total letting go of all holding. It entirely collapses the boundary between your body and space. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth subject the nervous system to this? Because it acts as a physical koan. By deliberately juxtaposing extreme somatic tension with a sudden absolute release, mudra effectively overrides the cognitive conceptual mind. It completely bypasses language processing to deliver a powerful, undeniable imprint of non-duality directly to the nervous system. Through that raw somatic feedback, it reveals the highly subtle, unconscious ways we literally contract our musculature just to prop up our ego defenses all day long. And that brings us to our final section, Section 6, the logic of crazy wisdom, the ultimate culmination of the Vajrayana view. All of this, the rigorous intellectual study, the precise breathwork, the emotional space therapy, the somatic intensification, it all lays the groundwork for the most advanced and frankly most misunderstood phase of the journey, Yeshe Cholwa, or crazy wisdom. Let's be clear, this is absolutely not erratic madness. It is definitely not an excuse for sociopathic behavior. It is primordial wisdom run wild. It's a completely transparent, radically unconditioned state that just slices right through conventional norms and spiritual emotionalism. It represents a ruthless, uncompromising expression of compassion that relates properly and fearlessly with reality, operating completely free from the exhausting, dualistic ping-pong of hope and fear. Trungpa's own words on this are crucial. He clarified that wisdom comes first and the craziness comes afterward. Only on top of basic logic or a basic norm can craziness exist as a higher sanity, a higher power, or a higher magic. This radical state only emerges from a flawless, complete mastery of basic logic and karmic cause and effect. You have to thoroughly master the rules of conventional reality before you can ever transcend them. It stands as the ultimate fruition of basic goodness, a higher sanity that naturally and spontaneously creates a little chaos in the environment just to break through the limited, egoic reference points of everyone around. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with something to really chew on. If your ego is truly just a brilliant defensive artifice, a highly dynamic cognitive process rather than some solid permanent thing, what actually happens to your phenomenal experience of reality when you finally allow those boundaries to collapse? How does the reality of basic goodness apply to your own cognitive frameworks when that habitual ape instinct, that constant struggle, finally ceases? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep practicing, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.